It was the last Saturday of June, and the summer heat in Willow Creek, Oregon felt like it could peel the paint off the houses. Harper Ellis, a 19-year-old college student home for break, decided to unwind by going to the community pool just outside her neighborhood. The pool was popular during the day, but by late afternoon it usually emptied out. Exactly what Harper wanted. She arrived around 5:15 p.m., carrying her faded blue towel and a paperback mystery novel. The sun was sliding toward the treetops, scattering long shadows across the water. Harper loved that hour. The pool was quiet, the air smelled faintly of chlorine and pine, and she could hear the distant hum of cicadas. At first, everything was peaceful. Only 2 kids were still splashing in the shallow end, their mom watching them from a bench, scrolling on her phone. A lifeguard sat lazily in the high chair, spinning a whistle around one finger. Harper slipped into the water, enjoying the cool rush over her skin. After a few laps, she climbed out, wrapped herself in her towel, and sat on a recliner under the fading sunlight. That's when she noticed a man leaning against the chain-link fence near the corner of the pool grounds. He wasn't dressed for swimming. Dark jeans, a gray hoodie despite the heat. His hood wasn't up, but a baseball cap cast a shadow over his face. He looked out of place, standing perfectly still with his hands in his pockets, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Harper tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. But a small chill rolled across her shoulders, unrelated to the breeze. A few minutes later, the kids and their mom packed up and left. The lifeguard checked the time, blew his whistle, and muttered something about ending his shift early. Within 10 minutes, Harper realized she was alone, except for the man at the fence. He hadn't moved. The shadows around the pool had deepened, stretching across the water like dark fingers. The surface of the pool reflected the orange-pink sky, rippling slightly as if stirred by an unseen hand. Harper told herself not to panic. She dipped her feet back in the water, pretending to be calm. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the man slowly tilt his head toward her. A faint creak came from the gate, so soft she wasn't sure if she'd heard it or imagined it. She looked up. The man had stepped closer, now inside the pool grounds about 20 feet away. "Hey, pool's closed," Harper called, trying to sound casual though her voice trembled. The man didn't answer. Instead, he took another step forward. His shoes scraped the concrete. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet evening. That was when Harper noticed something strange. His shadow stretched toward her, but it seemed too long, snaking across the wet tiles in a way the fading sunlight shouldn't have allowed. Her pulse quickened. She stood, grabbed her towel, and backed up toward the exit gate on the opposite side of the pool. The man kept walking slow, deliberate steps, his face still hidden by the brim of the cap. Harper thought she heard something faint beneath the cicadas' buzz. A whisper, carried by the warm breeze, though she couldn't make out words. "Look, I'm leaving," she stammered, fumbling with the latch on the gate. The latch jammed as if rusted shut. A splash echoed behind her. She whipped her head around. No one was in the water, but a set of ripples spread across the deep end, moving toward her as if something unseen had just surfaced. The man had stopped walking. He stood still again, only 10 feet away now, head tilted to one side like a curious predator. Harper's heart pounded in her ears. She yanked the latch hard. It screeched open at last. She bolted out of the gate, her flip-flops slapping the asphalt as she sprinted across the empty parking lot. She didn't look back until she reached the streetlight at the corner of the road. When she finally dared a glance over her shoulder, the man was gone. The pool area behind the chain-link fence was empty and still. Except there was one thing she couldn't explain. The water in the pool was still rippling, long after it should have stilled, as if something beneath the surface was moving toward the edge. Harper didn't go back to the pool again that summer. A week later, a news alert popped up on her phone. Local police investigate series of nighttime pool break-ins. Residents report seeing an unknown man in gray hoodie near Willow Creek Community Pool. Harper didn't tell anyone her part of the story, but sometimes at night, she swore she could hear faint splashing outside her bedroom window. Her room faced the woods, half a mile from the pool. And every now and then, when she walked past the pool's chain-link fence during the day, she'd see faint, wet footprints leading from the water to the gate, even though the concrete around them was bone dry. It was a rainy October night in the small town of Briarwood, Maine, a place where the streets went silent after 10 p.m., and the only sounds were the wind rustling through the birch trees and the occasional distant horn of a freight train. Lena Cross, a 24-year-old graphic designer, had just moved into a second-floor apartment in an old Victorian duplex on Willow Street. She loved its creaky charm. The antique wood floors, the bay window that looked out over the empty road, and the faint smell of cedar that lingered in the hallways. On this particular night, the rain tapped against her windows in slow, steady patterns, almost like fingers drumming on glass. Lena sat cross-legged on her couch, sipping chamomile tea and working late on her laptop. At 11:47 p.m., a single knock echoed through the apartment. She froze. The knock was soft but distinct, 3 slow raps. Lena set down her mug and padded to the door. Her landlord, Mrs. Kenner, was in her 70s and lived downstairs. She often checked in unannounced, but never this late. "Who's there?" Lena called gently. No answer. She stood there for a moment, listening to the rain and the occasional groan of the old building settling. Finally, she brushed it off as her imagination, until the knock came again. This time it was louder. 3 knocks. Measured. Patient. Lena's heartbeat quickened. She looked through the peephole. The hallway light flickered, casting a dull yellow glow on the landing, but no one was there. A chill swept over her. She double-checked the deadbolt and went back to the couch, pulling her blanket tighter around herself. At exactly midnight, another knock sounded. This one slow and deliberate, followed by a faint drag of what sounded like fingernails scraping the wood of the door. Lena's breath hitched. "Mrs. Kenner? Is that you?" she called, her voice tight. Silence. Then, after a pause, a man's voice, deep and muffled, spoke from the other side. "Delivery for Lena." She frowned. Delivery? At midnight? She hadn't ordered anything. "Leave it at the door," she called out, trying to sound steady. A strange sound followed. Not footsteps. More like a slow shuffle against the floorboards, too heavy to be casual but not quite walking away either. Lena peeked out the peephole again. The landing was empty, but for the briefest second, she thought she saw something. A tall shadow moving out of frame, its shape stretched unnaturally long, as if the dim hallway light had warped it. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the coffee table, startling her. It was a text from an unknown number. "I can see you." The blood drained from Lena's face. She dialed 911 immediately, but as soon as she lifted the phone to her ear, the line went dead. No dial tone, just silence. The knocking started again. This time it was faster, louder, like fists pounding instead of knuckles. Lena backed away toward the kitchen, heart hammering in her chest. The pounding stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of the rain and the faint hum of the fridge. For a moment, Lena thought it was over, until she heard the creak of footsteps coming from above her. Her eyes darted upward. The apartment above hers had been vacant for years. Mrs. Kenner had told her it was used for storage and hadn't been occupied since the 1980s. The footsteps moved slowly, back and forth, like someone pacing across the attic floorboards. A cold draft brushed the back of her neck. She grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter, clutching it with both hands as she backed into the living room. That's when the knocking returned, but now it came from the back door that led to the fire escape. 3 knocks. Drag. 3 knocks again. She didn't want to look, but her eyes were drawn to the glass pane of the back door. A tall silhouette stood outside in the rain, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and in the flickering light from the street lamp, she could see one pale, wet hand pressed flat against the glass. Lena's phone buzzed again with another text. "Open up. It's cold out here." Her throat went dry. She didn't move. The hand on the glass slowly slid downward, leaving a long streak of moisture, then disappeared as the figure stepped out of sight. Silence. For a few minutes, She didn't hear anything. The pacing upstairs had stopped. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, a whisper came from the front door. "Delivery for Lena." She dropped the knife in shock, the clatter echoing through the empty room. In a burst of adrenaline, she grabbed her car keys, threw on her coat, and sprinted out the front door of the apartment, slamming it behind her. The rain drenched her as she ran down the street, barefoot and shaking. She didn't stop until she reached the lit gas station 2 blocks away. When she returned the next morning with the police, there was no sign of forced entry. Both doors were still locked and nothing had been disturbed, except for a single wet footprint on the kitchen floor, leading from the back door to the hallway and stopping abruptly halfway across the room. The officer looked uneasy as he glanced toward the ceiling. "Ma'am," he said, "you might want to stay somewhere else tonight. That attic upstairs. There's a door up there that looks like it was opened recently." Lena moved out of the Willow Street duplex within the week. No one ever rented the upstairs apartment again. But sometimes, on stormy October nights, neighbors claimed they heard faint knocks echoing down the hallway, always 3 at a time, followed by the slow drag of nails across wood. The storm had started hours earlier, thick gray clouds rolling over the skyline of Ravenwood, Illinois, bringing with them a sheet of icy rain and flashes of distant lightning. In a brick apartment building on Ashwood Avenue, Ethan Ward, a 27-year-old night shift nurse, had just finished his dinner when the power cut out. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the entire building plunged into darkness. Ethan sighed. Power outages were nothing new in Ravenwood during storms, but there was something about the way the fluorescent bulbs had sputtered before dying that left him unsettled, as if the power hadn't just failed, but been snuffed out deliberately. The storm outside howled through the narrow alleys, rattling the window panes of Ethan's 1-bedroom apartment, Unit 4C. He fished a flashlight out of the kitchen drawer, its weak beam illuminating the beige walls and a few framed photos of his parents. He checked his phone. No service. "Of course," he muttered, running a hand through his damp hair. The building was eerily quiet. Normally, he could hear the muffled sound of a TV coming from the unit next door or the distant thump of footsteps from upstairs. Tonight, there was nothing. Just the rain against the glass and the occasional growl of thunder. Ethan decided to grab a blanket and wait out the storm on the couch. But as he crossed the hallway, he heard it. A faint creaking sound, like someone walking barefoot on old wooden planks. He froze. The sound came again. A slow, deliberate step, and then another. But Ethan lived alone, and the hallway carpet outside his door should have muffled any footsteps. He shone the flashlight toward the door. Nothing. Shaking it off as his nerves, he settled on the couch and tried to focus on the storm outside. That's when the elevator bell chimed. The sound was crisp and out of place, too loud in the otherwise silent building. Ethan frowned. The elevator ran on the same power as the building. Without electricity, it shouldn't have been working at all. He set the flashlight down and walked to the peephole. The hallway was lit only by the weak glow of the emergency exit sign at the far end. He saw the elevator doors slide open. Someone stepped out. At first, all Ethan could see was a tall silhouette, hunched slightly as if ducking under the low ceiling, its outline distorted by the shadows. It didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, it turned its head toward his apartment. Ethan's breath caught. He stepped back instinctively. The figure began to walk down the hall. Its gait was strange, uneven, almost dragging, the sound of each step accompanied by the faint scrape of something metal across the floor. Ethan locked the deadbolt, even though he knew it wouldn't matter much if the thing decided to come in. He killed the flashlight to avoid being noticed and crouched in the corner of the living room, listening. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. Silence stretched for several seconds. Then came a soft, deliberate knock. 3 times. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. The knock came again, harder this time, followed by a low, hollow whisper that seeped through the cracks of the door. "Ethan, let me in." He swallowed hard. Whoever it was knew his name. Ethan didn't answer. The whisper came again, this time closer to the bottom of the door, almost as if the speaker were crouched, peering in from the gap. "I'm cold. I just want to come inside." He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes locked on the door. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, as though something heavy had slammed against the wood. The hinges rattled, and a long crack began to splinter upward from the center of the doorframe. Ethan stumbled backward, grabbing the nearest thing he could find, a metal floor lamp, and held it out like a weapon. The banging stopped as abruptly as it had started. For a moment, all he could hear was the thunder outside and his own ragged breathing. Then came a new sound, the elevator bell again, soft and distant. He crept back toward the peephole. The hallway was empty. The elevator doors stood open at the far end, the inside shrouded in darkness. But just before the doors began to close, he thought he saw something. An arm, pale and long, slipping back into the shadows of the elevator car. The power flickered back on moments later. The lights blinked to life, the hum of electricity returning as if nothing had happened. When Ethan finally found the courage to open the door, the hallway looked as ordinary as ever. But something was wrong. A set of wet footprints, too large to be human, led from the elevator to his door, and then stopped, vanishing entirely in the middle of the hallway. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when he went downstairs to ask the building superintendent if anyone else had reported strange activity during the blackout, the man gave him a puzzled look. "Elevator?" the superintendent said. "Kid, that elevator's been out of service for weeks. We're still waiting on the new cables." Ethan moved out of apartment 4C a month later. New tenants came and went, but none stayed long. To this day, on stormy nights when the lights flicker in the building, residents claim to hear the elevator bell chime faintly. Even though the elevator hasn't been repaired in over 3 years,